2 seconds.
Okay, great. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. My computer is acting just a little slow today, but I think it will be fine. Hello, my name is Yasmin Parker, and I am currently a second-year undergraduate student. And the design I will be presenting is titled The Pods. So firstly, I would like to go through previous designs that we did prior to this project. So first, I would like to show you the horizontal home design. This one was focused on outdoor space, and I really tried to play around with the idea because it was made for students of intimacy, mixed with also like social interactions and such. And then with the vertical home, I really learned a lot about vertical cores, and I also learned how to work with space because there was very limited space for each floor. And then the sectional home, the concept for the sectional home ends up being very integral to the project. Mainly it focuses on views out of these different extrusions in the building and cross ventilation along this axis here. So the site is located in Uptown New Orleans, and this is what the site looks like currently. And the proposal suggests that we change it to this. Oops, sorry. So when I first visited the site, one thing I noticed was that there was a lot of people walking around. Like foot traffic was mainly the biggest thing I picked up on. There was a lot of foot traffic. There was a lot of people going to the cafe. There was a lot of students going to get boba from the place across the street. So I thought that that should be something important to my design. And just for reference, these are the 3 structures that are supposed to remain on the site post the proposal. So the community that I wanted to focus on was a community of healing, learning, and growth. And the reason why is because when I first even heard the brief for this project, I immediately thought that in a city like New Orleans, where tragedies and such are constantly happening, such as Hurricane Katrina, the high incarceration rates in Louisiana, COVID hit New Orleans really bad. There's a lot of room for just healing and growth. So, so the strategy for my program is as such. So learning will be in the top left. And the reason why is because this is where the students will reside when you see the plan. And I thought it fit best there if students are learning. And healing would be in these 2 areas, and there's no structures there. This is just outdoor areas. And then growth would be where the families would reside. And then this strip down the middle is a pedestrian boulevard. And that was very important to the design since day one. And these are just the different types of programmatic spaces that would be in this space. Unfortunately, I did not finish my diagram for the different programs, so I wanted to make sure that it was clear what I still had. And I'll go through what spaces are what when you see the plans. So the proposal. So this proposal calls for 2 new structures that are designed to work together to create both an inviting and welcoming addition to the existing neighborhood and an intimate experience and atmosphere for the future residents. One of the complexes, is what I call them, is made primarily for students and or single adults, and the other complex is meant to accommodate families. Both feature large occupiable spaces or extrusions that either face inward or outward. The pods allow for the user to have more focused and private moments while simultaneously connecting one to the outside world. So here is a diagram of the sort of massing strategy that's presented, presented, yes. So the green represents vegetation, and I thought it was important to, although I wanted to integrate the community into the existing neighborhood, and that was very important. I also wanted to make sure that all the existing current residents could still maintain their own private moments and their own way of life and lifestyles. So I thought that like a canopy of trees would be a good way to separate the new from the old. And this light yellow is the general shape, the U shape. That was important to me. Originally, it was a courtyard shape and it was enclosed, but I thought it would feel more connected to and give the buildings more synergy if it was more of a U shape. And the dark yellow is just the buildings that are not being taken down. And then again, this is the, like this stripe green is the boulevard that goes through the middle. So here we have our first floor plan. And here you can see that we have a basketball court over here and the playground over here. And these are part of the healing programs. And then over here, when I zoom in later on, you'll see more of the details in these spaces. But on the ground floor, they are both very open to each other and open to pedestrians and anybody walking their dog or anybody just going through the neighborhood. And here is our first floor. So, or our typical floors, better said. And on the typical floor, we have these pods here, and these are the bedrooms. And it is the exact opposite with the other building, except it's not bedrooms. These are communal spaces. So you can look at it as looking out and looking in, and they kind of yin and yang each other. And altogether, there are 5 floors for each building. Each floor has roughly 10 units, but some floors are duplexes, so that's why there's 60 units in all. So back to the theory of the sectional home, when I was first brainstorming how to make this building, I went back to the concept here and I started stitching together some of the themes. So here is a more updated diagram though. And this light yellow represents circulation. So this would be just an outdoor bridge. And in this next strip, we have only bridges into your home or wet areas such as bathrooms and kitchens. And then we also have the vertical cords that lie within these strips. And then the light green represents living area, so living room space. And then, like I said earlier, the dark green is just bedrooms. And for the student complex, it is the opposite. Dark green is the communal spaces, and then there's access cores, and then just living space. So here I'll quickly go through the program. Here would be a shed for any farmers markets or events that would happen on this large boulevard. We have a community garden in the middle with a little greenhouse. And over here, we just have the core in the mail room and lobby over here. In the bottom left, there is a juice bar, and the bottom right, there is a herbal remedy store. And this is a closer look at the floor plan. And here you can really see these bridges connecting indoor and outdoor. And for ventilation, we have these recessed balconies. And each bedroom has a window looking out, so it's very intimate. And also, but you can also share special moments with your family. And then the next floor, oops, sorry. The next floor is the same thing, except the corners have been taken out to connect it better to the foot traffic below. So it's almost like a community porch. And then we have the same themes going on here, except these, the top floor would have duplexes, just to add a variety of spaces. And then with the other building, the ground floor is pretty much similar to the other one, except this is a bookstore. And there's just a lot of study spaces because this is where mostly students would reside.
1 minute left.
Here is an elevation of the family complex. And here is a section of through the courtyard of that space. And then quickly, I'll just show you, these are the large, medium, and small units. And here is a perspective looking at the family complex. And then this is inside of the student complex, and more intimate, more towards each other. And then I made this perspective to kind of, it's from like across the street. And I just wanted to emphasize the fact that you don't know if these people live here or not, but it's about connecting with each other. And I put my board up here because I could not get it to get on Canvas, but that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Yasmin. Really nice work. Very well executed in terms of the graphic representation. Very easy to understand and kind of navigate with you around your project. So thank you for the clarity there. There kind of are three ideas that kind of popped into my mind watching all of this, which was extremely well put together. So it made the kind of things that came to me very, very easy. And I wouldn't say there's so much a criticism as they are kind of questions for you. And kind of the first question has to do with the slippages and overlapping that are possible. And I see that running around in your project, but I think you haven't exploited it, or you haven't explained how you've exploited that so much. And I think these overlaps and these slippages are most clearly illustrated by the decision not to do a courtyard, but to do a U-shaped building, at least at the ground floor. And so I think that it's those kinds of moments when you have an opportunity for slippages that I think are really wonderful discoveries, because they unlock you. I mean, as architects, we're trained to lock down and to really make very clear what the basis of our decisions are. But as you grow and you really become very, very good at this craft of pulling things together and assimilating, I think it's the slippages that you look for. And so I think that these negotiations that you're creating between spaces that are less defined, I think are the most successful aspects of your project. So crossover in terms of programming on the ground floor where things have a kind of polyvalent uses, crossover between inside and outside, which has to do with climate and understanding when a heavy rain comes that an overhang is helpful, or that when the sun moves around your building, and I assume your plans are oriented north, right? North up. So
yes, they are. Sorry.
I think being very specific about how that might influence the building on the west side, for instance, or on the east side where you get morning light coming in, or where you get afternoon light coming in, and letting that kind of be a moment where you get some slippages happening in the morphology of the building, the massing, the way you're treating it. I think you're just sort of searching for opportunities to find these ways to kind of unhinge. I mean, in fact, you're so rigorous about the way you approach this that I think that's what I would really encourage you to do as you move along in your education, is to find, not to be less rigorous, but to find ways to be extremely rigorous in unhinging yourself from the preconceptions of your project. So I think the final thing I'll say is that I really appreciate the way in which you've drawn through the project. The place that I long for more information has to do really with spatial conditions, the quality of light, the materiality, the decisions that you make about plants, and because I can see all of that, you know, the decision to put a greenhouse there and all of that is just great. I'm having trouble understanding the quality of these spaces. So, you know, I think that's enough said. I applaud your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yasmin, I echo Gabe's comments, and you know, I thought also that your presentation was clear in terms of your logical presentation. You know, I clearly understood that, you know, your jumping point of the pods as a concept from your previous exercise then really informed your succeeding work. So I can clearly see that, and so I commend you for that. And I thought that the drawings were also very clear. You know, the plans were also clearly drawn, and that then the spaces also of, you know, look, just I was zooming into some of your plans. You know, the units. I thought that they were very clearly drawn, and you know, you really looked at it very closely, and I can tell that you studied using, again, understanding with the furniture, the kind of scale, and how it would work. One thing that I'm curious, Yasmin, is that, you know, because you're talking about like how the students are in one building, and then the families are in one building, and I was curious to maybe hear more about like why did you decide to almost like create these two different sets of inhabitants, you know, or residents. Why did you decide to split it that way?
Yeah, just give me 1 second to go to the concept board so that way I can navigate a little faster. Oh, actually, it's not open. Okay, well, what I was going to say is that right below the site is a school, and I thought it would make more sense for the families to be closer to the school. And I think I mentioned that there was a lot of storefronts at the top part, the northern side of the site. And when I was there was just a lot of people around my age, just chatting, talking, meeting up, doing a lot of things. So I just was following I guess the patterns that were already present.
So then you're thinking that then the one on the northern side for the student housing, is that mostly then for college students? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, especially since it's located in uptown where there is already little housing for college.
So I think like maybe you can, I didn't catch that right at the beginning, that was the reasoning why you split it. Because it's just making me think about the possibility also of maybe allowing the students to also engage with the families and vice versa, that the families are also able to maybe engage with them and encounter them. Because like, you know, I as much as like the idea of the students being in one facility is great, you know, I mean, that works, you know, with kind of a dorm structure, but there might be an opportunity where the students can also learn from the residents, you know, with the families, and then the families can also engage to create more of a community. And I say this because on the ground level, I suspect that that's what you're trying to do, that you're trying to have all of these possible encounters, and that they're cross encounters because you're creating this large boulevard in the middle, and that then somehow the ground level is a little bit more porous. You know, you decided to open it up so that then it allows people to move, different residents to move in and out. So that's why I'm kind of like thinking, what if like you mix it up so that then maybe the students and the families are kind of like mixed together. I mean, it's just one approach, right? Like what I'm saying is just another approach. Again, if because you mentioned something about connecting with each other, and so that's what I'm also trying to imagine is like, where are these moments and opportunities where they connect? Because then in kind of in each of the building, you do have that open courtyard, and that is that is like one moment where they can converge and so on. Because they seem really very distinct, right? There, and you said it also very clearly. You said that even kind of the typology of it is that one is looking in and one is looking out. And I also wonder, like, why did you decide one is one way, like the students are looking in and then the families are looking out? Is there any particular reason why you did that?
Typically, I feel like when you're have children, you tend to look towards the future, and like when you're a student, you tend to be more focused on what you have going on, and it's more of like a selfish time period of your life. So.
But wouldn't you think like it's also possible for you as a student that you want to look towards your future?
Yeah, I guess that's not the best explanation, but
Right. So maybe think about it more, right, in terms of like what that logic is, and because I see also this possibility where maybe again, like looking at these two buildings, like are they in conversation? That's one possible way, because they seem very different, right? And I'm not saying that they need to be exactly the same, but maybe there's a possibility where they have some kind of conversation. So for example, you have the pods sticking out, and maybe looking at the perspective might be, yeah, the lower perspective here, for example, you're framing the view of the pod, and kind of like also this perspective on top. And then I'm looking at the elevation, but I actually don't see the elevation of the student housing. What if like there are moments where that kind of framing also happens on the facade? So you're alluding to the pods that are sticking inside, and then that therefore you don't. There might be that conversation that yes, one is in and one is out, but there might be the framing that you're doing in the pod for the sticking out has some kind of like reference in the student housing. So there's a little bit of conversation, and that there's a little bit more maybe engagement between the two of them, right? So something to think about maybe in the next step, or as you continue maybe developing this, especially for your portfolio, you can add more detail definitely on your perspective, to see the conversation happening between the two buildings. I would recommend.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think those are great comments. And there's a kind of binary thinking that we always do. And we're like, if somebody says design a museum, we kind of bring our baggage with us about that. And and we all also have things that we just have to get out of us, as designers. And I think that happens a lot. And I think it just takes some time to really listen to the project and listen to the parameters, and to get away from maybe, I don't want to call it binary thinking, but I think it's, in a way, the strongest thing you've got is the fact that you are able to kind of clearly identify the program and silo things and make decisions about how students live and how people with children live. But I will say this: in my house with 3 children, my dining room table has it's got no, after mealtime is over, it's everything. It's where homework gets done. It's where I paint at night. It's where my, big decision, my taxes get done on the table. And so in a way, I think that just by changing the lighting in the room, or changing the way in which, because like a dorm room, right? If you're a student, it becomes, in some ways, you're everything, right? It's your dining room, it's your study hall, it's where you sleep. And so in a way, I think it's not necessarily a lack of clarity that I would push for in your case. I would just go and find those slippages, find those moments where something can be convertible, where the courtyard becomes a U shape and all of a sudden it slips into being an engaging device in your project. So I would agree with everything that was said to you.
Maybe also like Yasmin, like one other recommendation I have is like looking at that ground level and that boulevard that connects that slices through the site, because you have that park in one area and then you have the basketball court in the other, and even just looking at this perspective here, I wonder if you can even add more landscaping to it, like more trees maybe or something, just so that then it becomes more welcoming. Because I mean, looking at the perspective, even just like the trees that you have on the right, and you were explaining earlier also like how you're creating almost like a sort of buffer zone between the houses that are staying by lining them with trees. And I wonder, do you also create maybe like a more sort of welcoming feeling also in this avenue or boulevard that you're calling in the middle? And maybe that's also one way to maybe then create a more sort of cohesive community, because then the landscaping, the trees and the plants are what's connecting them together. Because I think those public spaces on the ground level are truly important, and you've started to I know that you're thinking about it. It's very clear that you're very sensitive to that. So I think that would be something to improve also with your perspective, and also maybe even just on your ground floor plan, adding more and showing the landscaping would make it, I think, a little bit more approachable and accessible. So, but I know that you're thinking about it, so it's good that you're sensitive to that connection in the neighborhood. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Great, Yasmin. Really great feedbacks. I think that you are really, really lucky to have these reviewers today with us. So I really appreciate your feedback, and that Yasmin is going to take all of this into the project and it's going to improve it even more, right, Yasmin?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Thank you very much. I need to leave. I think that now is Abby's turn, okay? And it's gonna be Elise who is going to be the timekeeper, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you, Sansoles.
Thank you very much.
Okay, share my screen. Can you see that? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, hi, I'm Abby Carlton. I am a second-year undergraduate student in Andrea Bardon's section, and this is the design for the collective housing project in Uptown New Orleans. The design of the community links linear, narrow forms organized by typology with the shared elevated promenade. Cross-ventilation, orientation, and community circulation were all important factors when designing the community. The community is focused on bringing different people in different stages of life together through central outdoor spaces. The horizontal, vertical, and sectional home designs were used to understand space when designing the community. The horizontal home highlights the organization of private versus public spaces, along with an additional alignment of wet and dry spaces. The vertical home is where half floors are first introduced, also stacking programs and continuing the use of private and public spaces. In the sectional home, the idea of half floors were continued, and also a multi-height space was introduced, which connects the private and public spaces. This is the site in Uptown New Orleans where the buildings highlighted in blue are staying on the site. Here you can see the 9-block plan with the proposal in it. When first analyzing the site, the repetition and axial alignment of both horizontal and vertical structures was apparent. Highlighting this urban grain sparked the form and orientation of the project. One precedent I looked at is the High Line in New York City. While the High Line is at a much different scale than the proposed project, the ideas of public ground space, shade, and community circulation all stay the same. The elevated linear park allows people to interact with each other in an open and inviting space. And while the buildings surrounding it have different functions and different types of people inhabiting it, the linear park is the connection. The community is encouraged to interact in a variety of outdoor spaces, which allows the linear promenade to become a point of socialization and interaction. This illustration highlights the green spaces that are rhythmically separated by the enclosed buildings. The first diagram is a ground floor diagram, which shows the relationship between uncovered public green space and covered outdoor space, along with interior. The second diagram shows the different types of circulation that occur on the second floor. This includes the primary and secondary circulation, along with the vertical cores and ramps. The third diagram shows the different typologies and plan, and also the circulation into the units. The typologies are split up into separate buildings, which ultimately encourages them to be communal outside instead of inside. The ground floor is composed of mixed outdoor and indoor spaces for both the public and the residents living in the community. Public programming is located closest to the street, while more private programming is contained on the insides of the block. Housing the communal programming on the ground floor allows the second floor to have more of a separation between public and private. The perspective shows one of the views from underneath the promenade. Sliding glass doors as well as glass railings allows for conversation and views to occur across buildings. There are 4 main vertical cores that are connected to indoor amenity spaces. The main walking path for the ground floor is located underneath the promenade. This provides shade, as well as it allows for a direct path of circulation that leads into secondary circulation, providing access into the programming spaces. In the second floor, the promenade is more clearly highlighted, and also the linear housing becomes apparent. The main circulation breaks off into secondary circulation, which is the entry to the housing units. Having these narrow legs allows cross ventilation to occur, along with natural light and focused views. The secondary circulation paths also allow for views down into the public open green spaces. The integration into the existing community can also be seen through section. This is the section where the ideas of the communal relationships is highlighted. It also shows the relationship between the types of units and how they align with each other, along with the views that occur from balconies, both private and public. The third section highlights the repetition of units in a singular building, along with an example of indoor and outdoor communal programming. Also, the elevated promenade can be seen, as well as what happens underneath. The back facades of the buildings are composed of shutters, which allow the residents to open or close their shutters based on preference. In New Orleans, shutters are important for a variety of reasons, including building temperature, regulating humidity, and protection from weather. This illustration shows an example of 2 different compositions of shutters. Here is a view from the promenade above. People can be seen talking to their neighbors, playing in the green spaces, and overall interacting as a community. The first typology is a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit. There are 24 of these units in the community. The diagram in the corner shows which buildings house these units. The design of the units encourages residents to get outside and interact with other residents, but also with the rest of the community around them. This is the second typology, which is a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit. There are 18 in the community. These units have a large outdoor covered private space on the second floor. The third typology is a larger family unit, which is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit, and there are also 18 of these in the community. This is a view taken from inside one of the units showing 2 shutters open. The back facade of the building behind it can also be seen in elevation. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. Nicely presented again, very thoroughly drawn through. You know, I think what jumps at me very quickly is, again, is a kind of clear notion about the architectural impulse, which is to kind of elevate and create these kind of outdoor spaces. So as much as your project is about what's happening inside the units, I think you've sort of clearly laid the case that you're interested in what's happening outside. So I guess there's a few things that I would love to maybe push you a little bit on, or try to understand a little better. One is the connection between the upper level, this kind of avenue that runs through the middle of the block, and the community. And sort of, maybe it's my understanding is not quite there on how I get there and how I get up and down. So maybe a little bit more elaboration on that. The second has to do with, again, kind of understanding the orientation. And I think these balconies and these shutters and you have all of the elements here. I grew up in New Orleans and I worked there for a decade as an architect, so I get the climate there pretty well. And I think that what's really, really important is for you to be specific about the orientation. So the architecture lends itself to a kind of anywhere, anytime orientation, but in fact, the rain and the sun are going to get you if you're not paying attention to that, right? I think the other thing that's interesting about this project is that the neighbors and let me just back up. The orientation thing is you have some balconies, for instance, that are oriented toward the west and some which are oriented toward the east in your project. But in a way, that's not being kind of precise about it, right? So I think you've got the kit of parts that you need, but I'd love for you to sort of tell us a little more about why those things are oriented the way they are. And the thing that is a little bit odd to me is you have these existing homes that are there that aren't moving, these neighbors that decided not to play in this housing scheme, right? And it looks like you've got the orientation of the balconies generally sorted out with regards to how they fit in with those neighbors, and most of them turn away from those buildings. But you have a couple on the southern side that actually butt up to the sides of that one house. And I think it's kind of an odd choice, to make on your part, both in terms of the climate response, but also in terms of, like, is it deliberate, or was that just kind of because the architecture demanded a sort of way of addressing these things? Because you have these beautiful grassy, treed courtyard or open spaces that are on the opposite side of those. So it's just, I think the project is very clear. I think the planning is really tight. It seems like you've really worked it out so that you have a lot of space outside. So I'm kind of buying in to a lot of things here, but I'm just hoping for a little bit more precision in terms of how you deal with climate and how you deal with the urban condition, like how this boulevard that runs through connects with the broader condition at another level, and also how these porches, these outside spaces actually feel relative to how they're sitting against the neighboring buildings. But that said, I think it's incredibly clear, well-presented project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Abby, do you mind showing the plan, the one that's showing the with, I think it's the second floor plan with the elevated walkway? Yes, that one, please. So I think similar to what Gabe was also saying, like I highly commend you for such clarity also in terms of like your intent, in terms of really responding to the orientation of the neighborhood, right? Like you were following a very clear kind of logic with how the neighborhood and the community historically had evolved, and I think like you're trying to reflect that. So I'm glad that you're looking at beyond just the plot that you're given, something to really consider. And the walkway in the middle offers a lot of opportunity to connect each of the sort of strips or the wings that you're creating. One thing that I'm curious, Abby, if you can explain a little bit more, is that you decided to have one type of unit per wing, right? So which means that they're all of the same type, size, and typology of units. I wonder why you did that. I'm curious, like why you decided to just keep them all the same in one bay or one wing.
The first thing I kind of thought about when doing that was just how I wanted the community like engagement to be occurring more outside, and even like with like regards to the shade, like it can still be happening outside underneath the promenade, like that's all shaded area. So I wanted to keep the housing more like really like rigid and all the same, so that people were more encouraged to interact with other people outside of their houses, because I wanted the houses to be more of a separation between public and private. So instead of having the communal areas on the same floor as the housing with mixed typologies, I wanted to be more separated so that they would be more encouraged to go outside and interact with other people, but still could have their interior like private space be like really set and rigid.
Okay. I get it. I think I understand what you're trying to do. I guess like I'm also imagining just a possible unintended consequence though of what you're trying to do, because just trying to remember like also from the brief about like how you're also trying to mix maybe different income levels. So there's a possibility that because let's say and again, you know, it might not happen that way, but it's possible that then are you also segregating people by class? Because let's say the people who can afford what was it like, what's the smallest size of your unit? It was like 500 square feet or something.
Yeah, it was more like, so the units stay the same, they're the same width, but they extend long ways. So like the width stays the same, but the length changes. So it would be more like all it does is add a bedroom or a bathroom. So it's not really much of the other spaces changing. It's more just the bedroom and bathroom. So you pretty much just be buying a house of the same size with an extra bedroom or an extra bathroom,
But
because the communal spaces, right, it would be separated.
Right, but that means also that then, because like a larger unit, like a 1,500 square feet unit, might, you know, somebody who can afford to rent that would just, again, these are possibly unintended consequence, because then you are then unintentionally or unconsciously then segregating then the more expensive ones in one wing and then the least expensive one on another wing.
Yeah.
And then in a way to then solve it is to actually mix them up, right? Then so that then there might be more engaged. And again, you know, for also then another unintended consequence. So let's say a 1-bedroom unit might be somebody who doesn't have a kid, right? Whereas let's say a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom unit would mean that they might have more children and there's more people or an extended family. So somehow you're also segregating them, that the people in one wing are only then interacting with people of their same type. But I understand that what you're trying to do, that then with the elevated walkway in the middle, it's somehow also you're funneling them all through there. So then that's where maybe they meet. Again, I'm just pointing out that there might be a possible unintended consequence. And then also looking at the plan, I'm curious also because then is it a balcony or the walkway? For example, in one, I wonder like why is this, for example, here narrower versus the other one that are much wider? You know, like the one. Oops, sorry, I should be annotating here. Why is this narrower versus, let's say, this one? Is that a balcony?
If you're like on the concept board, it's not letting me move slides, but in my typology slides. So the one that you just circled first with the narrower walkway has a private
that's
terrace above.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a 2-story. So I wanted to give more like a place where they could have like outdoor furniture or something if they didn't have a second floor with outdoor space.
Okay. Because it seems like they're different widths of the corridors, and so I'm just curious about what that is. And then the other part maybe is just the elevated walkway. I like that idea of it's connecting, and I think there are still opportunity for you to explore like what other things can happen there. Right. So for example, like you're showing, can you zoom in a little bit? You're showing tables being at the edge. But I think because it's wide enough, I think there's a lot of other opportunities where maybe are there play areas there. And again, because like you're using the High Line as a precedent, you can mix the activities also on that on that elevated walkway. There's so much possibility, I think, that you can, and it's just, you can just explore by adding more furniture and thinking about like what can you create in maybe different zones along the walkway to really enrich the kind of experience in that walkway, right? Like, because you're saying that you want them to come out, so give them the opportunity to come out, right? And give them reasons to stay in that area.
Right. I think those are really great comments. And, you know, I think it's, I just want to add, you know, I know this is a final review and I hate kind of coming in at not participating in the mid review. And I taught for 7 years at Tulane. I've taught at Cornell for 5. I get this process is difficult, but I will make, Abby, just a couple of very concrete suggestions that maybe won't take you much time, but would really change your project enormously. I think that this center walkway that you, or this center space that you created, I think it could be much more like the High Line if you really thought about landscape and you really thought about programming that in section. So maybe it doesn't have to be this big platform that runs across the entire site. You may have penetrations in it where you think about how you might connect like a big tree coming up from the ground and really branching up into this thing, or how it works with circulation. Right now, it seems like the connection between some of the balconies and the center spine, I'm not sure what's going on in section, but it looks like the circulation, the vertical circulation is actually blocking the connection a little bit, maybe, if I'm understanding correctly. So maybe think
Yeah,
about,
that's correct.
Yeah, maybe think about whether that's right or not, and whether each of these connected porches, I mean, I think what I'm saying is I see a lot of development on the planning of the units themselves, but I think the communal space, which is really what Edson was talking about, sort of democratizing that space and making it more communal by planting and by considering how it connects with these other balconies and what it's really like to occupy those shared spaces, right, is a small thing that you could do that would go a huge distance in making this a very convincing proposal. And it would tie it back to your precedent, right, which is really using landscape as a way to take what was leftover space and really making it beautiful. So I think you also need to be very specific about on the balconies outside of the units, how you could use landscape there to create a condition that's not so communal. Like, in other words, there are stages of this shared space, right? When you get to your balcony, even if you're sharing it with somebody next door, you might think about a little bit of green or a little bit of a planter or some way of delineating a difference between one stoop and another. You know, in New Orleans, the stoop is a great definer. It's like, when you're on my stoop, you're on my stoop, you know, and that's clearly my, even if you don't have a big yard or a big porch, you got your stoop and that's your stoop. And if you invite somebody to sit on your stoop, that's your stoop and that's your deal, right? But in your case, the delineation is not there for me yet on the shared porches, right? So I think just a little bit more effort in terms of elaboration on the landscape and the articulation of the outdoor spaces, you know, would really go a long way in your project. And then the final thing I'll say, and it's not a big thing to do, but you talked about cross ventilation at least 3 or 4 times in your presentation. The problem I have is that the openings in your building, really beyond the shutters, I don't see how, when I look at your plans, these sections are great, but if you had a high window to the right of the right building, right, in each level of that, one could imagine just creating little openings here and here in your units, and really making a convincing case for taking advantage of gravity-borne hot air discharge from these units. And that would be so simple for you to do without changing a lot of this at all. It would be a very minor, but then you could put a little flow through there, a little arrow through there, and you could then make a very compelling case that you really understand the climate that you're working in, and a practicing architect who looked at that in your portfolio and says, man, this is really interesting. This idea about landscape and about taking advantage of the climate is really compelling and believable, especially now in the day and age where climate response and resilient architecture and sustainable design without having to have a lot of big air conditioning bills, right? That you're really thinking about that. So, but I think, again, those are very minor things that you could do to make this project really strong, much stronger.
I'd like to also add to what Gabe was saying in terms of climate and being sensitive to the climate. One thing that I really appreciated, Abby, with your solution is also the use of the louvers and the shutters. You're, as you said, you're obviously referencing to the shutters that we find in New Orleans, which is great. And can you go to one of the perspectives, maybe showing the shutters? Looks like the elevation, I think, looks great with the louvers and the shutters, and it's a nice kind of change. As you open it up and close it, it creates a lot of variation, I think, which is great. I'm curious, like, what happens on the ground level, because like here I can clearly see the louvers on top, but then on the ground level it seems blank. I'm wondering what you're planning to do there. And then there are no shutters here, for example, by the side of, or louvers again, because like the depending on where you are, right? Like the sun would still hit the hallway. So I'm wondering, would you also need louvers or shutters here on this side as well? It can still open, because it's, as you know, like, it becomes really hot and depending, as on the eastern or western exposure, right? Depending on the day, then it would be the sun would be beating on to, and especially like your orientation, right? It's all the strip is facing up north, right? So then one side will really be exposed to the western exposure, and then the other one on the eastern exposure. So I suspect you might need to then have shutters on both sides. And create layers then by which then you'll be able to protect the hallway. But to go back to my question, what's your intent about the lower level? Because looking at the elevation, you're not putting shutters, but I wonder, what are you thinking?
You can see that. Let me go to actually the other perspective. I wanted the ground floor obviously to be more open. I didn't really think about adding shutters to the bottom, which I probably should have, but it was just more, there's nowhere really for shade obviously on the top floor except for like in the houses. And I figured the ground floor, there's like so many interior spaces that would provide shade. But that was one thing I kind of struggled with, was deciding which side I would open, because originally I was thinking I wanted the side closest to the street to be like all glass and have like windows open so the public could see. But then as I started like 3D modeling and making my perspectives, I realized that I wanted kind of to focus more on the relationship across buildings by putting the glass more on the interior sides. And having those like columns continue down were really just a point of support, like the idea of having, I kind of knew I needed to have support, but also it continues, like obviously the columns are where the houses are separated. So just visually, it made more sense to me to have like the lines kind of align with each other rather than it just being, also like since the front of the building has no shutters, I didn't really think about putting them, but that is a really good idea.
Something to think about, and I'm not necessarily suggesting you have to put shutters everywhere, right?
Yeah, but just more conscious of what's shaded.
Yes,
and
like exactly. And if you do want like maybe sliding doors or windows, you can still have like two layers where you have the glass on one, and then you still have the shutters on another layer, so that then it allows the person to be able, kind of like when it's sunny, they can close it. When it's cloudy, they can pull the shutters up. I mean, that's what's great about these shutters. The variability of how much light do you bring in, is something that you can control. So something to think about, right? Like, and then adds to and you can play around with it, in the perspective, what if you do have those shutters, what would it look like, and then how would it feel like, because that might then give you some more, I think it will just enrich also the spaces that you create, because of how you're also showing again the sensitivity that you have already on the upper floors. Are you also thinking about like what's happening on the ground floor? And then one other kind of like last maybe suggestion, I was looking at the plan. You might need to add another set of stairs at the end of the other wing, because like all of
Okay,
the stairs now are just on one side,
Yeah.
closest to the elevated walkway. I think you should have another set again for as an alternative for fire
Okay.
later on. So you might need to think about just where it is on the other end or on the other side of the very long strip.
Okay.
Right? Otherwise, fantastic work, Abby.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for all the comments. I think I'm going to move to the next one, but I wanted to say thank you and hi, and thank you so much for the presentation, Abby. I think they were amazing comments and super useful to keep moving on in this project or thinking about it for the next ones. Okay, I leave here the concept board link. I don't know if it was placed before, but we're just making sure that you have it
Yes.
there. Okay.
Thank
See
you,
you.
Andrea.
Bye. Thank you.
Who's next? Elena?
Yeah, that's me.
Hi.
Hi.
Should we wait for Guillermo, or do you think we should just go ahead?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Do you want to give him another 3 minutes or so?
Yeah, we're ahead.
Hold on. I'm just going to step away for 3 minutes. I just have to go check my email.
Okay, I'll come back in 3 minutes too. Okay, give us a second. Do you want to start?
Yeah, that's fine with me. What is the present mode?
It's Control L. But it's
Okay, sorry about that. Hello, my name is Elena O'Brien. I'm in Guillermo Lockhart's section, and I'm in the second year studio this semester. This is the axon, the main axon of my project. This is my horizontal home and sectional home, which I use their shapes, their volumes, as like a jumping off point for the units in this project. It's my vertical home. The pre-existing site has a genuine neighborhood feeling from the lively colors, cracked sidewalks, knobbly trees, and idiosyncratic nature of the buildings. And this inspired the goal for the new block to create a condensed but porous block that would function as a neighborhood on a miniature scale to fit in with what is standing before. Creating the visual perception that there is little or no particular organization to the scheme through a rigorous implementation of restrictions and system of rules that would allow for clear organization with unique relationships between each unit and the site. These were the precedents. The main axon. The circulation deck is what connects all the units together into one collective. It interacts with the units and green spaces and community spaces to provide light, privacy, porch spaces to each unit and tie together the vertical circulation, the street, and there are 5 vertical cores that connect the 3 circular decks and provide entry options on every side of the block. The communal spaces are all located on the ground floor. The community workshop is adjacent to the bar on the interior side of the block, and the community run and owned bike shop that connects to Jenna Street. There are 4 laundry and service spaces built into the spaces, pushed into the spaces between the ground and second floor decks. Each scheme is organized through the unit's relationships with the ones surrounding it and the trees that were on the site. This personal feeling of unique interior and exterior views, private and communal intersections add an atmosphere of individuality and variety to each space. This is the second floor plan. This is the third floor. Creating the visual perception that there is little, my sections. The upper floor schemes raised on pilings to create horizontal spatial connections as well as vertically throughout the site. The footprint of the second and third floors sit within the boundaries of the positive space from the floor below by maintaining the same negative spaces throughout each floor. large light wells are created and visual connections are allowed with the floors below. The units. The unit's exterior shapes are repeating. So there are 3 sizes. This is the small size, which is 1 bedroom. This is the medium, which is 2 bedroom. And this is the large, which has 5 bedrooms. Regardless, so they're repeating regardless of their specific locations, but their window orientations, porches, and doors are personalized to the relationship of the units around them in the scheme. The perspectives highlight the connections both vertically and horizontally throughout the block, where plants can be seen climbing floors vertically and provides light to the ground floors below. And that's everything that I have.
Thank you very much, Elena.
Thank you.
Elena, can you go back to your plans for a moment? I just want to try to understand them a little.
I think the diagram is clarifying if you're confused about this.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you could just go to the next plan and just hold there for a second. Okay, and the next one. Okay.
And then this is the last one.
Got it. And the section, just hold on that for a second. Do you have a section with one of the existing buildings? Or is that in there?
You can kind of see the gray box. I didn't model the whole building. I just left them as a volume.
Okay.
So you can see the elevator.
Yeah, I'll just jump in, I guess. I really, again, I appreciate particularly the orthogonal drawings are very clear. I would say the context is rendered very, very faintly here, but I do appreciate the clarity of how you're drawing this, because to me there's a kind of beautiful impulse that you have to democratize the site, which I think is really the best thing about the project. The way in which you've left space for chance kind of encounters, not only between people, but between space and plants and the sky. So I think there's a kind of wonderful impulse that you have compositionally about arranging these things. The difficulties that I'm having with this project are really things that probably would come to you later, but I think one thing that would need to come to you now is structure. So you have these beautiful volumes that are kind of floating around, and if you could go to your perspectives for a moment, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Those great color, yeah, these are wonderful, because they kind of get at the spirit of the project. But I'm kind of like really freaking out, because I'm wondering how you would support the boxes up in the air, right? There's this kind of magic thing that's flowing horizontally around, very thin plates that are flying around, and then all of a sudden I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, there needs to be some kind of column there to get you down, right? To get the gravity load. So, I appreciate the kind of spirit of intention here, but I do think that and maybe it's working back between these drawings and the plan drawings to kind of find where there's a system in this seemingly random organization of chance that brings your gravity loads to the ground. I think there's challenges with these schemes like that the habitat type schemes, and gravity is certainly the most challenging to kind of find that organization, but still have this beautiful composition that seems scrambled up and allows for these chance encounters. So I think that to me is the one serious thing that I would ask you to kind of, before you leave the project, before you shelve it and put it in your portfolio, I would think a little bit about that system, because I think it would make the project much better. These projects are inherently also skin intensive. And by that, I mean, there's a lot of surface area when you develop a scheme like this, where there's more individualized wrapping of the units as opposed to a shared roof structure and shared wall planes. So I think in terms of offsetting that, if I were you and I were trying to describe this, I would say that while you have potentially more skin area, what you get for that is more individualized space, more of an ability to create chance relationships between inside and outside. And so in a way, these compact floor plans that you've created, that is one way to offset this more of the skin. And also maybe, I don't know, you could begin to talk about using a less expensive skin material and really relying on color, which you have done in your proposal here, so you could, for instance, have an inexpensive metal skin panel, but using color to differentiate either the orientation of it or the type of unit might be a way to sort of offset the argument against that, right? But I kind of love the spirit of the project. I feel like, without really understanding the scale next to the houses, I think there's an opportunity for this kind of strategy to really succeed. So I do appreciate it enormously. Thank you.
Thanks.
Elena, can you go to the axon for a moment?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think I really appreciate the way you handled the complexity of this one, because it's such a it's not necessarily a very straightforward grid, or the grid maybe may not be as obvious, but I think like what's interesting about what you're doing is that then the way you're aggregating them, the different sort of modules, they seem very dynamic, and I find it very exciting because like you do have like different sort of modules sticking out, and then some are sort of receding, and so it really becomes a very dynamic overall composition. I think like what you also did is that then, because you did separate some of these houses in a way as almost like freestanding houses, but you aggregated them, you have more opportunities also then for some of the windows and the openings to be happening on all sides. I do agree with Gabe in terms of maybe a way to then maybe to edit it, or to maybe sort of revisit it, is that then maybe do you join some of them and think about like, are there shared walls in some areas, so that then maybe their walls for economy. And I understand, at this point that's not necessarily the aim yet, right? But I think that's something to think about next, is that then how do you maybe share some of the walls, or something that then would allow you to for economic purposes, kind of edit it a little bit, and kind of discipline the complexity, right? Because it is very complex, right? I think like what you're doing, and that's why I commend you for handling that complexity, and it shows kind of like you're also like how you're very playful in terms of how you're moving around the different elements and the different modules. So something to then think about, one of the things also that you might want to also sort of consider is that there are a lot of walkways. And then I'm sensing that there are places where there are communal, are there communal spaces or communal or sort of public spaces in some of these? Because I see that some are much larger. Is that your intent, or is that I mean, what's your thinking about these walkways?
Yeah, so if I go back to, sorry, not sure where it is actually, right here, you can see the walkways laid out from the ground floor up. And then the last one is the like compiling of all the voids in the walkways. So on the ground floor, mostly where there are like wider spaces in the walkways, there are places where it widens out for like the communal spaces. Like places where there are steps down to small courtyards where there are pre-existing trees, and there are some that go up to like a kind of like semi in between floor for like some kind of like formal place to hold an event or something. And there are some that are just inaccessible voids that are for privacy around the units, and then some are just for vegetation. And
so maybe what you can do then is maybe just add another diagram showing you also like maybe different colors or kind of different indication, because like as you were explaining it, it would have been better to just show it as a diagram, right? So that I can quickly understand also like where the public spaces are. I could tell that there are some of those options and possibilities, but I just didn't see it, right? Because I think that's why I wanted some clarification. So I think that would be a good opportunity to show like where these public spaces are. The other point I think that I'm curious also is that then the relationship of you don't have a perspective. Can you go back to your perspective? Do you have a one that shows how it relates to the neighborhood? I'm just curious about the scale of it, and also then
I think you can probably see it best in the section here. This is like the 2-story steakhouse here, and in the background here you can see this.
Okay, I can't really see it. It's very faint. Yeah.
But I don't have any that relate to the.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just curious, like how it would relate then, if you're stepping back, and then let's say how it would relate in terms of the scale, because you don't show it here necessarily in the perspective. Yeah, I love these perspectives, by the way. Like I love the energy of these drawings. Did you use markers to render these?
No,
or watercolor.
did them with watercolor, yeah, and then I like did some digital overlays.
Oh, I commend you for using watercolor. I mean, I think it's like a dying art. You know, I'm biased. Like I love hand drawings and I love watercolor. So that's why when I saw it, it's like, oh yeah, that's fantastic. Elena's like doing and because like, you know, at this day and age when everybody does digital rendering, then there's also a danger where everything looks the same. And so, you know, the challenge is that then how do you stand out? And that's why like for your work stood out for me, because then of the you know, how you were, it just looks very different, you know, from the other renderings. So that's why I commend you. But you know, you use of digital, you know, I think like having more figures would help also to understand the scale, which you did in other renderings. And maybe there could be a view that then shows it how it relates to the neighborhood, so that then there's a little bit of understanding of the scale, because then the kind of complexity of the geometry, some might think like, oh, you know, it's too much, right? Because then the neighborhood is of a different character, and it might be your intent, you know, that you want to stand out. That could also be argued, that you don't want for it to blend, and that's fine too, right? So, and I think that's why I commend you for kind of the bravery to make this statement in the neighborhood. So because handling this complexity is not easy, so I commend you for that.
Thank you.
We have a few minutes for more comments or questions or
I'm sort of curious, Guillermo, like what is the sort of take on flexibility in terms of the interior programming? I mean, I think that one of the strongest things about these projects that we've seen so far is the level of certainty with which the students are drawing kitchen plans and bedroom plans and really kind of they're drawing them to with the furniture in them very convincingly. But I think particularly in a project like Elena's, it seems like there might be the ability to blur between a bedroom and a dining room or a living room, or to kind of conceive the system a little bit more loosely, so that, you know, in a way even the distinction between inside and outside, which there's a sort of implication in this project, this particular project, that maybe even the erosion of clarity might be between inside and outside, the way in which a wall might open itself up between two spaces or between inside and outside. And I just wonder if there's kind of the ability to kind of bring, now that they know how to draw these things so well, they understand the scale of a room, you know, if there's the ability to kind of blur that boundary a little bit more, you know?
Elena, you can show your typologies.
Yeah, you move quickly through those, and I think they were quite convincing.
This is
You can explain them a little bit, Elena, and talk about like you have in every unit, you have a porch, you have a terrace, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so every unit has a set of characteristics that I wanted to maintain, so that each unit is like a full home, kind of has all the aspects. So there's a courtyard, which is more private space connected to the community here, with a back door, and a front door with a porch space that is like part of the deck, but you would be able to kind of make it your own, which would be like a closer communal connection, so a little more public. And then these voids here with the plants growing in them, which would provide privacy around the bedrooms, and provide light to the floors below.
Yeah, I mean, it's so convincing to look at these plans, you know, they're so well done. All I would do is add screen doors. That's it, nothing else. Really, like, you've got this, right? So my only question earlier is having more to do with thresholds, which even in the way you move from the bedrooms to the kind of shared public space, you've even thought about how one needs a threshold between a bathroom and a public space where there might be a party going on, or between the bedrooms, which might need to be a little quieter. You've thought about all of those things so well, and I'm totally convinced when I look at the plans. It's only when you kind of aggregate them together that I wish, as Edson said, for some way to rationalize parts of it. You could bury it in this beautiful composition for sure, but like a plumbing chase might want to go next to another plumbing chase for another unit, right? But these are things that you'll get to them, you know, in the years to come. So I don't want to spend the entire time talking about that, but I think the strength of your scheme is in these kind of compositional impulses. But then how do you really move between these very thoroughly thought out plans and that beautiful kind of composition, which I guess I am also uncertain about how it fits into the neighborhood exactly, but I'm pretty convinced that that strategy would work, you know, that you could be successful in this staggered, broken down scaling that you're after. It's only in the practical questions about, you know, do I have to walk up the stairs in the rain, or can I have them covered? It's how do I move these vertical walls down, and how do I consolidate the plumbing chases from one unit to another, and all these kind of nagging questions that, you know, you really do eventually find joy in answering. So I'm only encouraging you to hold on to the impulses that you have as a creative maker of drawings and models, but to really embrace those things like you did with these plans, to embrace those problematic things like structure and plumbing, you know, and really push them into your project.
Yeah, I actually like that comment a lot because I feel like I'm always kind of having to create restraints for myself so that I don't like go too far on something and it won't work. And where instead of like trying to push myself to do more. So I feel like that is something that I'll probably struggle with. And
I think, you know, what we're almost always looking for is for you to make buildings that look believable in a way. And in a sense, I think that what I would say to you is that when I look at your project, I would almost like to see it less conventional, like just build a scaffolding out there and have containers kind of plugged into the scaffolding. And you know, in a way, it seems like all of the things that, and it probably wouldn't be possible, but something like it might be possible where you have a framework that people come and they build their own buildings in, right? So in a sense, that's sort of what this suggests, is a less formal relationship with city planning and codes and the neighborhood organizations and all of the things that, you know, that it could be more a kind of informal arrangement, even politically and economically, in the way that you conceive the entire project. So that's the rub for me, is I see these plans and I see them really wrung out, and then I see a less resolved kind of agglomeration or amalgamation of in the massing. And I'm kind of torn. I think you are too, about, do I go with more conventional, more believable, or do I go with something that's more open-ended and more provocative, you know, as a kind of a challenge to the program, to the brief.
yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you very much, Gabe and Edson, for your valuable feedback.
Yeah,
I'm sure it would help a lot, Elena, and it was also pretty useful for all of us. So thank you very much. I will change now, and another instructor will come here and you'll get to see another student. So thank you very much. Thanks, Elena, also for your presentation. I'll see you later.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Guillermo.
Hi, I'm next. My face is the one waving. I had to zoom in twice. Should
I was
we...
wondering, like, where's that coming from?
Yeah, there's two screens. Should we wait 2 minutes for Professor Norman, or would you like me to start?
I think we can wait. We still have a little bit of time.
Okay.
For Terry to come in. If you want to do a quick break.
While we're waiting, I just want to know what the cross streets are again, because I lived actually not so far away, I think.
The streets are Cadiz, Barron, and
Barone, yeah.
Barone, my bad.
Yeah,
and
Dryads is on the north.
And it's Cadiz and Jenna are the north-south, and then Dryads and Barone go east-west.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually owned, my first house in New Orleans was a double shot on Dryads. And I'm trying to remember what cross street it is. I'm hoping it's not this block, because I'll be completely confused now if it is.
One of the houses that are being taken out.
I could very well be the stubborn neighbor, you know.
Right. Is it? And I'm wondering, because why are those three the only ones that are not willing? Like, is that a real sort of condition?
Well, two of the buildings are commercial buildings. There's a steakhouse and then French Truck Coffee. And then the last is a residential. So
they're holding out.
Yeah.
Here's Carrie.
Okay.
Hi, Malia. Have you started?
Hi. No, I'm about to start.
Okay, perfect. Take it away.
All right. You can see my screen?
Absolutely. Looks great.
All right. Hello, my name is Malia Bavuso. I'm a second-year undergrad in Professor Norman's section. This semester, we were tasked with creating a co-housing aggregation on an existing neighborhood block in New Orleans in order to accommodate more residents as well as to introduce amenities. This solution is titled Sunflower Collective Housing. To begin this exploration into co-housing, we began by designing small-scale, single-family homes and by analyzing the New Orleans porch condition. These early designs investigate the porosity of indoor and outdoor space and a repeatable plan with disruptions through section. The porch analysis introduced a new type of barrier space between public and private, the collective. In setting the intentions for this community, I took a closer look at the neighborhood as a whole, specifically focusing on the relationship between the inhabitants and the environment. The block is located in a developed suburban area without room for the natural environment to grow. There are only 2 parks within a mile radius, shown in green, and they are both hardscapes serving as playground space. Most importantly, the area is lacking in supermarkets, with the closest being a mile away. This is shown in blue. This limits the inhabitants' access to fresh and healthy food. By implementing large community gardens and a farmer's market, the co-housing community at Sunflower will be able to use the outdoor space in a positive cycle of healthy growth. This also introduces the possibility of selling extra crops back to the surrounding community. In order to maximize the growing power, as well as implement passive cooling systems, a solar study was conducted on the existing site, as well as one with a preliminary massing model of the project, to see where the longest shadows fall, and also revealing the south facade to be the most affected by sun. This led to the overall shape of the master plan, which takes the typology of an open linear block and turns with a sawtooth pattern along the sun path to lend itself to self-shading in the sunniest parts. At the individual plan scale, the darkest areas became a service core, and spaces primarily used during the day are north-facing, while mostly night program faces south to escape the majority of the harsh sun. Inspired by Raphael Moneo's work on the town hall in Murica, column-like brise-soleil were implemented on the south-facing facade for solar control, as well as introducing individual terraces to each unit. To better blend the project into its neighborhood, a column analysis was created based on the neighboring homes to create similar spacing and proportions. Here's the ground plan shown along with the surrounding site context. The ground floor plan, here you can see the large productive gardens and farmers market, which is located on Cadiz Street. The typical floor plan is the second floor, which is the first floor of livable space. In elevation, the tower volumes alternate to preserve views throughout the units, as well as to avoid any fully shaded spots at ground level. The individual units share the same modular plan, but are comprised of different levels. The smallest studio unit, which is 570 square feet, is a single level. The medium unit, which is 935 square feet, is a full height level with a mezzanine that hosts the bedroom area and looks down onto the living room. The third and largest unit, at 1,140 square feet, is 2 full levels. All units are fairly small and aimed mostly towards young couples or single people, ideally those who are looking for work and who are interested in improving the life of the surrounding community. Thank you for listening. I'll go to concept board now.
So I'll jump in. I'm just sort of curious if you could describe, you were very careful about modeling the sun, the orientation. I'm curious about how exactly that works with these gardens. If you could just describe a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think I show it best in this diagram, but I wanted as much sun space to hit the ground as possible. So I dedicated large plots to the gardens, and I divided them up based on how much sun they would be getting, and that leads to like the crop type that it would be. And I also dedicated the largest spot of evening sun to the market, since I thought that would be the best sun type for a night at the market.
Okay, and how is there's a large piece of open, what appears to be open space on the left side. Is that right?
The top left?
Bottom left. That
Yeah,
green area there. Yeah.
That would be the market.
A market. Okay. So, and then along the southern side, that is also bright light green. What is that programmatically in your mind?
They are, all of these plots are gardens. They're just different types of crops depending on the sun level.
Okay, and then if you could just go to your plans for a second, one of
Yes.
your full plans of the block.
Yeah. This one?
Yeah. Okay, so you have delineated garden plots. Are they shared or are they associated with a unit?
They are shared, and they're also open for the surrounding community to walk around as well.
Okay, got it. And then if you could just go upstairs one level.
Yes.
So the part of this that I'm a little confused about still is I see the circulation is shared between what appears to be 2 units. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So,
that's correct.
So you're only sharing the stair and elevator with two units, right?
Yeah, but it goes like all the way up.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah. Yes.
Okay. And then if you could just go to your unit plans and show me the middle unit, not the smallest one and not the biggest one.
This one?
Yep. So that one has a kind of loft space in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens to all the space that's, I guess what I'm having trouble discerning is when you have the largest units, you're actually using 2 full levels. And in the middle unit, you're doing something with all of that space that's not accounted for. Is it just a double height volume there?
Yes, it's just a double height in the living room.
Okay, so in terms of usable area, you've just decreased the usable area to reduce the size of the unit, but you're actually getting a higher volume in that space.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess from the point of view of the things that I think are the most successful, I think the way in which you've really analyzed the sort of response to climate, or at least solar orientation, is extremely successful. I think it's, you know, what you discovered in doing that is that if you orient a long, narrow building north and south, if you orient those 2 faces north and south, that in Louisiana, you need a very, very small amount of overhang to create shade in the hottest part of the year. And in the winter, when you want some sunlight, you'll actually get full penetration of sunlight across this plan. If you don't mind muting your mic, that would be great.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just getting some background noise. So if you orient the buildings the way you've done it, and you know this, you get in the winter in December, you'll get light coming straight through your floor plans, which is amazing for the people who live there, especially if there's a double height space like that. So I think that in terms of kind of organization, and in terms of your analysis, I want to commend you for that. I think that there are some inefficiencies about circulation. You probably have more stairs in your project than anybody else we've seen thus far today. And so I would say that immediately, I think there might be a challenge to the way in which you decided to dedicate stairs. I'm not sure about the number of required stairs that would come down from the collection of units that are served by that one stair and elevator core. Are there 2 stairs on each of those, or is just 1 stair and 1 elevator?
1 stair and 1 elevator per core.
Okay. And how many units are served? How many units is that stair serving total in section?
They alternate since they're not all the same height, but the maximum would be 6 or 12. My bad, 6 floors, 12 units.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think the clarity of that plan and the clarity of your idea is really there. It's really solid. I just think that if you did a quick study of buildings, the most expensive things that you could buy in a building are elevators and stairs, that somebody else has to share the cost in. So I think if you could find a way by creating for instance, a balcony that went across that might be for circulation, it might solve 2 problems. You might be able to reduce the number of stair cores in your project, and you might be able to solve the code problem, which I think if you go over 3 stories, you need 2 means of egress out of a building. But I mean, this is second-year stuff. I guess the fact that I'm getting in the weeds on this means that you've done a lot of very convincing work. And so I applaud that. And I think the only place where I would love to see more is in the way that these colorful, beautiful renderings of the building. I think it would just help your project so much if you could kind of move us in a way sequentially from a garden up into the buildings and into the units and really share more of that. So I applaud the project. I think you've done a wonderful job, and the only criticisms I have are probably not appropriate for a second-year projects, but I think I'll say them anyway. So thank you.
Thank you.
Malia or Malia, is it?
Malia.
Malia. Malia, thank you so much for your presentation. And I really appreciate I love the story that you were telling about the collective housing, how I did your analysis of how far the next supermarket is, and that how you're very conscious in terms of integrating these community gardens and farmers markets. So I really appreciated like how you were thinking about it in a larger kind of like a larger context, and that then you also went into you made the effort to study the solar path, which I thought that was great in understanding how the gardens would work. And one thing that also struck me was the way that you were also analyzing the rhythm and also the kind of grid from the neighborhood houses. I think you had it in your presentation, wasn't it? That one, yes, that diagram. I was struck by that because then I really also understood then, because of this diagram, like how you were taking that rhythm, that sense of grid forms, that then you translated it onto your complex and the structure. So I really commend you for doing that. It's very sensitive, like you were analyzing the neighborhood and that how you were then embracing that, and then at the same time you're also reinterpreting it in a good way and in a different way. So I think that's what I appreciated about the way you're then composing then this new form. I had very similar sort of comments about the circulation, about the stairs, and about the kind of, do you combine maybe some units and they're served by maybe smaller, kind of like a shared, the stairs and the elevator shared, but but I'll not dwell on that for the moment. One thing that I wondered was the idea of why did you decide to stagger them, and is it really because of the sun your solar study, like how you decided to the stagger the modules or the units?
Well, I had already been studying the typology of an open linear block, and the main orientation of the east to west was decided based on the solar study. And I originally introduced the jogging sawtooth pattern as a way to maneuver around the existing buildings. And once again, just the orientation of it going upwards was the part that was decided by the sun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just imagining, do you play more with the staggering, and so would it be all in kind of like one diagonal, or would it change as you maybe pull it apart a little bit? I'm just curious, like, what might be the effect of that, because like looking at the sawtooth as it relates to the house or the business, on the corner of Dryads, or the top on the northern end, but then it has a different relationship on Barone, because then the house is on a different orientation. So I'm wondering, what could there be a different relationship with that house? It makes sense, in the orientation and above that relationship, because they're, you're kind of like shifting it away from the house, but then on the southern side on Barone, it's almost like as if like it's almost like hitting the other house. So I'm curious, like, what you thought about that relationship with the houses, and the buildings that you cannot remove.
I agree. I definitely could push a little more with the distribution of my units relating to the houses, in a way where maybe as they get closer to the houses, they push further away from themselves. Mm-hmm. Because I definitely thought of it more as my units first and then the existing houses.
Okay. And I because can you go also to the axon?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe, at the moment where it's closest to that house on Barone, it only becomes like 2 stories or something.
Yes.
That's another possibility. But this one, like, I really love like how your play of heights, and like I thought like this is just great sort of composition in terms of like you have a variety of heights that then doesn't make it boring, and kind of because you're using the same module, and I think like you did a great job in terms of making it varied and dynamic, even using the same module. And then your animation also showing like how the trees also sort of come out of the kind of grid form on top. And yes, exactly. I thought that was really great. It really helped me understand like the way over time, the plants will sort of interact with the building. So I think that's great.
Thank you. Yeah, I focused a lot this semester on introducing differences in section, and instead of plan so much.
Mm-hmm. Just trying to look at the section also, where does it show like a maybe you can add more plants there later on to communicate that sort of garden on top. And I thought your perspectives were very dreamy. So it's I love the kind of dreamy quality of it. Maybe can you zoom on that, just the top one? dreamy where the people are also ghosts or wireframe. So maybe you can add more people there just to understand the scale further. But I thought like this is very these are very evocative perspective drawings.
Yeah, and I'll sort of pick up on Edson. I want to pick up on the comment, or the maybe the thing that to me, I agree with your observation about how the buildings meet their neighboring existing buildings that aren't moving. In a way, I think it's an opportunity to not, again, be ignoring them in a way, but to make those intersections between the people that didn't want to move and the people that are building these collective housing spaces really much more generous. And in a way, it kind of forces the regularity of a language that's kind of marching its way through the site, and it would have to stop or change direction or do something at those moments that would make that quite special, not only for the people who are building the new buildings, but also for the neighbors who couldn't figure out how to participate in a way, sort of create this kind of welcoming, warm friction in a way. I think it is a few pieces of great architecture that do that well, that deal with those spaces, and it happens a lot in New York because you are always territorializing, and the value of real estate is so great that to find those places where you're creating. I'm having a senior moment, and I'm trying to think of this courtyard that's in Midtown. It's so famous. Anyway, I think these moments of a collision between two different owners is an opportunity for kind of brilliant interaction. And I think that's the one place where you could really maybe elaborate a little bit. I think the roof, we didn't talk enough about it, but it is spectacular, and it's potentially a whole layer of your project that I see you illustrating in this kind of post-digital technique, but you didn't really show it as maybe as much a part of the plans. And I think this notion of the sunflower or the planting and how it influences everything in your program, from the ground floor to the rooftop to the way in which you've really gone to great lengths here to show us that each of these units gets a garden, and it's even at the micro level. And that's why I kind of long for a more communal space, more of elaboration of communal space at each of the floors between these two units. Maybe there's some way to illustrate how two neighbors might share a kind of green zone in their unit configuration, or how these garden boxes could be really a part of each of your explorations for planning the units. But I think it's a really well represented project, and we talked a little bit about on Abby's project, how just embedding in the floor plans and in the unit plans this notion of green and landscape would really push your project along. But it's beautifully done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malia. These comments have been terrific. And Gabe, we love getting in the weeds. And I think of the students, Malia loves getting in the weeds. And the degree of iteration that you have fulfilled throughout the semester, and particularly on this project, gives me the confidence that taking on some of those more specifics that the project, that I have the confidence that you could completely fulfill those suggestions brilliantly. While you guys were discussing, I was looking up Mises' Colonnade project in Newark. Gabe, maybe you know it. It's the one project that has a sort of similar proportion In the United States, we don't really have very many kind of wide slab projects, and that has 4 cores. So just a point of reference. So this is somewhere in between a kind of wide slab project and a kind of brownstone or townhouse type. But yeah, certainly the discussion on circulation and efficiency is well noted.
But I mean, again, I didn't mean to dwell on that. I think that there's so much going right here with the way that climate is dealt with and the solar studies. It's just, it just struck me, you know, that there might be an opportunity here. Not that you would, I don't think there's a flaw here necessarily. I think that there just might be an opportunity to kind of democratize those,
yeah, absolutely,
the circulation. That's all. I mean, it seems like in a program that's so much about sharing space,
absolutely,
that it would just be a way to really chase that down even more and to really embed that notion of shared communal space instead of just 2 units sharing that. You know, it might be that there's some happy collisions that could happen if you said, okay, what happens if I take away a third of the stairs and force people to move around each other a little bit, right? That's all.
Definitely. Thank you.
well, I'm going to peel off, and Professor Javert is joining, and I look forward to seeing everyone back in the main Zoom room later this evening.
Thanks, Carrie.
Hello, everyone.
Margarita, can
You're
we
resisting.
can we just take a quick break?
Yes. Sure. Yes, we have 4 or 5 minutes until 4:30, and since we are in this room, the last one, Catherine, long-standing waiting.
Margarita, great project so far. Really fun.
It's fun.
Well
Yeah.
drawn. Very, especially the unit plans. I can see your
Yeah,
iron
I don't
fist.
know. The line work is
Line work.
line work.
The line work is there.
Orthogonal projection. trying to. Yeah, I have to say that I'm impressed by the work of students. They really pushed it.
I want to ask you about this sort of post-digital representation that's sweeping through all of the architecture schools, including Tulane. Is that something that you guys are actively talking about, or is that just something that's coming with the kind of
Zoom
absorbing
area? You mean the digital, like exploded axons and all these?
Well, no, I think that's your rigor, but I think the post-digital representation, sort of collage, like, you know, it seems like we're getting a lot of that at Cornell, and we're getting a lot of it, you know, certainly at Harvard and Yale, but it's I would love for it to be more about New Orleans. You know, it seems like it could be in Switzerland, or it could be, you know, it's not a criticism. I love it. I want to see more of it.
I mean, particularly, I prefer the wire perspective of views that are more transparent and abstract, and the full imagery of an atmosphere is like almost that sometimes you smoke, you smoke these things, I don't know exactly what it is. It's too full, the 2 dimensions that are too full of information.
Right.
But I think, at this stage is about experimenting and then getting to know what is what and what for, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm a fan of cleanliness.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Edson, I have to say that Edson has been here the whole day, so
it's so great to see everything.
Imagine, Gabe, if you're suffering already, imagine.
Oh no, it's so hard over Zoom too. It's
yeah.
So.
That's okay.
I'm ready if you want me to begin.
Yes.
Okay.
Take us there.
All yours. I'm out.
Let's see. Oops. Okay, the last one, yay, I'm Catherine Dunn. I'm a graduate student, completing my first year, and I'm in Margarita's section. And as you know, this project's the urban housing, or the collective housing on the urban block. And this is my axonometric for my collective housing located in Uptown New Orleans. Co-housing is an intentional community of private homes, usually having a central focus of common activities or sustainable living interests. Co-housing characteristics of living promote close relationships with your neighbors and in the community while still living in your own private home. Through this type of living, you share values with your community, participate and work together to manage and maintain the common property and events, and have a smaller environmental impact on the earth. So before beginning this project, we studied the 3 types of home, the horizontal or 1-story, vertical multi-story, and the sectional or the hybrid of the 2. And this is my horizontal home. The design was focused around centralizing courtyards by minimizing private rooms and exterior windows to have the plan to be internally oriented to courtyards in the main central living areas. Through this design, the space can maximize natural lighting and privacy from the exterior. And then in my vertical home, the design roughly called for 220 square feet per floor. So the home was designed where the first 2 levels were communal spaces and the upper floors were the private bedrooms. And the exterior views were maximized with this design with the curved walls and windows to almost allow for 360 views when you were in the tall structure. And then this is my sectional home. It was designed to emphasize internal views without being just a massive open floor plan. And the design concept was inspired by an equilateral triangle. So when you approach the home, you were greeted by the outdoor living spaces, including a garden, and exterior living spaces and a pool and play area. And then as you enter the home, you walk into the kitchen, dining, and utility area. And then as you proceed up another level, you're in the common living space furnished with sofas, chairs, and desks that have views into the kitchen and dining below, as well as out to the courtyard area. And then as you proceed up another level, you are in the bedrooms. And then here's the section where you can see the vertical and horizontal relationships within the home. And then next we studied porches and how people live and interact socially and privately within the neighboring streets from our site. This was an interesting assignment to be able to study a block of homes and their front porches to learn how people live and interact within their community. Walking down the block, you perceive the block's character and energy by the porch decor and arrangements that self-describe the family-friendly environment. Almost every porch or front yard had plants and seating, and many porches had children's toys as well. And it became obvious that this block's homeowners gathered on their porches and within the sidewalks to socialize with their surrounding neighbors. And from the flags and yard signs, you could see how much the occupants supported local businesses, sports, and schools within the city. New Orleans residents have so much pride in their city and are such social people that you can see this from the residential streets. And although each porch is private to its own home and from the street, they are still inviting and an enjoyable environment to view and physically be in. And then here are some aerial images of the site for the surrounding blocks where our project is. And what I observed was there was a nearby school and a mixture of commercial and residential property throughout. And then here is a shot of the French Truck Coffee Shop, which is one of the buildings that's staying on the site, just to kind of give you guys an idea of the scale and color and kind of stylistically what's going on around. So before beginning the design process, I needed to decide what type of communal living environment I wanted for my co-housing community. And I kept thinking, what's a common thread in the community and the culture of New Orleans? What's something everyone can find joy in? What brings people together? How can this concept relate to housing? What can people share in the community but still retreat to their privacy? And the most obvious thing to me was music. So I designed a community for musicians where it focuses to promote musicians, providing a school for them, a music hall, outdoor venue areas, instrument stores, record shops, really anything that relates to music. And so how it works, here is my axonometric from the northeast, where you can see the relationships on how the site is laid out and its adjacency and heights to the surrounding buildings. On the left is my proposed urban block site, and at the top right, the dark green circles represent the existing trees, and the diagram next to it is the proposed trees with the existing.
And then below are the site diagrams showing the existing buildings in navy, and to the right is the new proposed site with existing and new in the lighter blue. And in the ground floor diagrammatic plan, the public spaces are represented in the dark green, such as the record store that anybody in New Orleans could go visit. The turquoise is the communal public spaces, such as the music school or the pool and kitchen grill house on the property. The navy is the communal exterior spaces, which includes porches and exterior music venues. And the orange is representing the vertical corridors that take you up to the housing units. And the black are the private homes that are staying from the original block. In the plan diagrams, you can see distinctly where there's variation of unit sizes and location. The light blue represents medium units, the mid blue represents small units, and the darkest blue represents the large units. And the black, again, is the homes that are staying on the site. In the ground floor plan, you can see the different programs of public and communal private and communal public, as well as how the occupants would travel throughout the site. Shown here is the second floor plan on the left and the third floor plan on the right. And here on the left is the fourth and fifth floors, they're identical. And then on the right is a typical medium floor plan, small and large. And each unit has a full kitchen, bathrooms, and private balconies. And the units range from 1 to 5 bedrooms between 600 and 2,200 square feet. And then here is where I tried to attach my animated axon, but it's on the concept board if you would like to see it. And then in the sections, the same coloring code for displaying the typologies and how they stack up within the unit. And then here's a perspective from outside the urban block on the northeast side. And here's a perspective within the community looking towards the pool house and 2 of the buildings. And then here's an axon from the southeast. Thank you. And I can share the concept board.
I dropped the concept board on.
Do you want me to share? Would y'all rather?
Yeah, you can share it, or either way. You're the boss.
Well, I can go back and forth because I didn't put all my drawings in the concept board. If there's something else you all want to see, I can go back to my presentation.
Catherine, thank you so much for this clear presentation. I just have one question about the communal programs. There's a courtyard in the upper right that I'm just so old I can't see anything. Yeah. So if you just zoom right into this plan, right? Okay, so there's a restaurant, and then there's a pool party room and a courtyard and kind of a pool kitchen. Okay, got it. So the ground floor really is populated by all these shared programs, right? So there's no residential component to the ground floor.
That's correct.
Okay, so let me just jump right in. I think that the way you're holding the street edge in your project, I really appreciate. I think that's a very strong thing to do in this kind of neighborhood where you've got sort of all these buildings that are fronting and very few kind of openings into the block. But so I think that's a very strong thing to do. I also think opening the middle of it and really kind of investing yourself in a study of program. I was going to sort of say, like, what makes this a musicians collective, and you know, this is convincing to me that you kind of invested yourself in what to do with the middle of the block. I think the scale of the buildings, I do appreciate the kind of width of the buildings relative to the surroundings. The only thing that I'm sort of still wondering about is the sort of architecture of it, and the sort of, you have this very kind of I'll just say repetitive use of the curved window at the corner of all the buildings. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of curious about, you sort of glossed over that in your presentation of your prior studies. And I kind of love the idea of the 360-degree view, because, you know, in my apartment in New York, or in Brooklyn, there's one weird sort of step in and I can't see down the block all the way, and it really bugs me because there's always something going on down there that I want to see. And so I really appreciate this idea about the ability to see around the corner.
Mhm.
But I'm just sort of, I would love it to sort of hear about it. You sort of begin to sort of use this language of the curved building, but it doesn't seem to be kind of resonating in your project in a way that I think you need to really do. Like you begin to use it as a new building in the middle of the block, but then the internal walls are kind of not really wrung out relative to the curve of the plan geometry. So I really appreciate the clarity of your presentation, and I appreciate the programming. But I'm really longing for, like, what drives Catherine? Like, what is it about this architecture that you absolutely will, go to bat for? Like, if somebody came along, if some loser came along and said, this is not a musician language, this is Art Deco, this is like some other, they could misunderstand it, right? And then you're kind of on your heels defending, like, why the curve is so important for the musician, right?
Right.
So instead of doing that, instead of being caught on your heels, I would love it if you would sort of come out charging with that and say, not only is this a language that makes sense about seeing around corners, but it creates this moment in the architecture, in the plan, or it's about acoustics, or it's about the way I get light into particular kinds of spaces, I just wonder about how you could kind of take off a little bit. And you're one of the few students who showed pictures of the context and talked about color and showed pictures of musicians in the context. And so in a way, I'm kind of longing for you to make the connection between your building and those pictures. In other words, if you could kind of weave them together, I don't think it would have to change your project, because I believe it's in there. I just think that it may be a missing drawing that you could bring to this, like a view from inside the courtyard where you have some activity and you connect the material of the building or this curved window, or somehow just lock it all in place, because it's completely rational. But I think that's the only thing I'm kind of really looking for to make it kind of convincing.
I agree. I think one thing I lacked on was pushing through to materiality in this project. I didn't quite reach that step in time. So I definitely want to work on that moving forward.
I guess it's materiality, but I suppose that it's like more geometry, more reasons for the geometry, or die, no? It's like more or die.
Yeah.
You do more with it, or you just kill it, no?
Yeah, it's like
in a way.
A little bit shy, it's like not quite there. So
I was also struck, Catherine and Gabe, mentioned Art Deco, because that was exactly my first impression when I was looking at I was seeing the perspective drawings. Like, is this Miami? And then it just made me think like that was the first thing that really came into my mind, which may or may not be maybe a good thing or a bad thing. It just depends on how you maybe argue for it. Looking at this plan also, because I was appreciating also how I think, like, by creating this moment in the middle, very inward looking, and then therefore creating a sense of community within, I thought that was like a great use of the space, and your public space is really well developed. So I really appreciate that. One thing I'm curious also is that then, so you have the language of the curved corners, and then this very orthogonal outside, kind of like the edge, and then inside, then you have these triangular shapes. So I'm just curious, like, where that came from, and then maybe you can explain it further.
So I took like the curving to kind of map out how the interior of the property would work, because originally I kind of did like loosey lines so you could see more natural, but it took away from the curve geometry. Like, it just made it more confusing. And then if I also did just like purely orthogonal, I kind of thought I would do the same. So I wanted it to be interesting and give some dynamic more to the interior. So that's kind of where I went. I just decided the paths based on like transporting between this building to this building, this building to this building. If you came in this gate, you know, where would you go? How would you get there? And I used all my, I guess, turns per se, or like change in direction by repeating the curve in my building.
So I think like so I understand now like the way, because you're basically creating the shortest distance in a way between the different buildings, right? So that then that's the pathway that's being carved out, because you know people are lazy and so they don't walk around in a circuitous way. So if they're doing laundry, you know, they go straight from the laundry maybe to another to the other building. I think like one thing that you might want to think of is the way then these diagonal lines either intersect or they meet the orthogonal. So for example, let me see if I can annotate this. Like this moment here, right? At every point where that diagonal or like that pathway sort of meets the grid of the other grid of being the orthogonal, right? Like you have these orthogonal lines. I wonder how do you either celebrate kind of these intersections as they meet that orthogonal line. So there's a little bit more clarity maybe of the way then these diagonal lines kind of engage, because like do they just end there? You know, do they just stop at the kind of this box, right? The curved edge box, or are there moments where maybe that the part where they then intersect is that maybe there's like a bump then to allow then to kind of receive the pathway, so that they're not maybe just ending in kind of like a wall, right? Like they're not simply kind of like and I know like I can see that some of them you're ending at a doorway, but there are moments where then maybe do you carve out the space a little bit, or again it's a bump out, so that it just doesn't seem like it's abutting a wall, right?
Because it just like dies into the
Yeah.
patio. It's a change in material, but I do agree that transition should be softer or just more natural in a sense.
Because for example, like in this area here, you have this patio, but you also have an overhang on top of it, right? Or is it open?
The overhang happens on the sides a little bit from the balconies above, but there's not like a formal overhang that wraps around the building.
Okay. So I think there's an opportunity then maybe, again, because like New Orleans, you know, it rains. So are there opportunities maybe where some of these connections happen, where maybe there are arcades or maybe they're kind of covered pathways? Again, because, you know, I need to do laundry and your laundry room is on the other end, you know, and then maybe they go, and then maybe that's where the opportunity also where that kind of intersection happens.
Right.
So there's a more a kind of like a stronger sense of connectivity between the different buildings, because you're already creating kind of this very protected and kind of safe compound like setting, right? Because then you are surrounding this this open space where then you have kind of like these public spaces. And then one thing that I also appreciated is that then I'm glad that you have, because it's a musicians community, you know, you have a kind of like a bandstand or a theater here, right? This is oops, sorry.
Yeah.
This is a kind of a performance space. And I wonder then also, are there other places that maybe where the musicians kind of like also perform, not just in kind of like one area? Does it happen on other floors? I don't know. I'm curious, you know.
Not necessarily in other floors, but I think this is the formal area, I guess, for the school is what my intention was. If, you know, the students were throwing a concert or someone in the community for a large crowd, but some other areas is like this patio space was pretty large, as well as this one. And then, you know, maybe if to partner up with the restaurant or something. But pretty much just the music playing or the bands playing was intended for the ground floor. But it's definitely something to think about if I wanted to bring it up vertically and have a communal space on one of the upper floors for that.
But it's also making me think about like how the kind of performance space that's inside, would it encourage people from the outside to come in because they would feel like they are then maybe coming into a private space? And I'm wondering, you know, maybe just kind of like imagining what if like you flip it out, you know, and then so then the public can be outside or the performance space is outside, so then maybe the public are, you know, feels more welcome coming in, right? Or do you carve out like a portion of a corner, then maybe that's where they enter or something, you know? Again, I think I'm thinking about like that, the relationship of and how do people feel coming in, if they feel they're welcome, and kind of how do you set it up, you know, in terms of feeling it, making it feel more welcoming, let's say for the public, if that's what you want them to, how you want them to engage within your complex.
Yeah, I think those are all, I agree with all of those comments, and I just want you to leave with two thoughts after all of this, and you know, apologies for not getting to you at the mid review, but because I've done this on a couple other projects, I think that there might be small things that you could do right now at the end of this project before you put it in your portfolio, before you shelve it, that would take it a huge distance without doing too much. One of the ways you could do that is to describe how musicians occupy your project without changing anything about it, except maybe adding a little bit more, either in text or in visual. It could be furniture, it could be a little piece of color on your plans that say, these are the places where musicians occupy my building. And in the morning, there's a violin playing in the restaurant, and there's stoops on the fronts of each of these entrances, and there's a big bandstand in the middle of this. And that would be a way for me to be, oh, that's convincing. I understand now how the musicians occupy your project, right? And then the second thing that I would really encourage you to spend a little bit of time in is how the language of the architecture is related to some other thing, whether it's a precedent that you've looked at, like the last student, Elena, talked about the Mineo building and how she related the scale of the Mineo building to the scale of the neighborhood, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to your program, but just a way to lock somebody into why you decided to use these curves and how you did it, right? So that you're not just sort of, the people aren't guessing about it, right? That Catherine needs to bring this curve to her project in some way, right? So without changing anything, you've just really been more rigorous about the way in which you've described those two things, how your program relates to musicians and how the language of the architecture is really specific, either to the climate or to a precedent that you've studied, or to you know, some other, it could be that it's musical. I don't know that. It could be that the architecture is studied in a way, you know, and there's thousands of ways that people have done that. So I just think that those two things, they don't really change your project at all, but they're just a way for you to describe more concretely and to make it more believable that you've really thought about it, because you have. You took pictures of that and you invested the time to sort of study it. So that's all I would sort of long for here, is to sort of you're being more clear about what drives the project. And to me, you know, it might include you drawing a floor plan, like it might be illustrating with color on this site plan how musicians actually occupy this site, And then within a floor plan, you might say, in this corner, like behind Edson, there's some beautiful bookshelves that really soften the space or that absorb sound, and that, or there might be a ceiling treatment, or there might be, just by using simple color, you might be more specific about reflectivity of space, or sound deadening, or maybe the way two people occupy one part of a house and play together, or somebody occupies a space alone. You know, just kind of make that program believable at the unit level.
I do have a precedent, and I showed it at my mid-review, but the critics really didn't like it. I guess because stylistically it totally was opposite, but it's the apartment buildings by Zaha Hadid in New York.
You got bullied? You got bullied in your mid-review? Is that what you're saying?
I did, yes, I did. And they were like, that's way too modern. And they just like, and I was like, it's not about the style, it's about her curves and her balconies. And that's exactly what I was trying to put into mind, that each unit has a balcony that acts as their porch, but it's their balcony to then enjoy the outdoor music, engage with their neighbors, like exactly how I studied with the front porches.
So you already have it. So just bring it back out and then just insist on it. Just keep bringing it back out.
Perfect, I will.
Sooner or later, some client's going to believe you.
That's the goal.
Catherine, also just to add what Gabe was saying, something that you can also easily do with your perspectives, again, to add that level of believability, and also like communicating further that this is a musicians community, because I saw that you did have musicians. Is that like a mariachi band in the perspective? I'm not sure, but how do you maybe just add more detail to the perspectives, like maybe highlight the musicians there, rather than there's kind of like this straggling musician like in the middle, maybe just make it, add more entourage, add more landscaping, just add more, a little bit more activity, so that it feels like, because like the central part really shows you a lot of these public space. So maybe just add that to your perspective, so that then it really makes it more dynamic and really tells the story of how, yes, this is like where a lot of the people converge, and they're like they're enjoying the music and so on. So it's something that you can easily do to do after the semester, but then could help you with your, strengthening your drawings for your portfolio.
Yes, I agree.
So thank you so much. So since we're in this room, we are ending before the other three rooms. I was suggesting, if you go to the chat, maybe we can all, students and jury, choose a room. I was suggesting Gabe to go to room Lockhart. I don't know if you see the link, and for Edson to Norman's to see one more student to join efforts with the, and then at 5:30 we'll meet at the room 0 that will be posted on that room again. So we'd like to listen to from you all the juries of the afternoon together and their thoughts.
Okay, Edson, great to be with you.
Gabe, nice to meet you.
Thank you both.
Thank you to the students. Great work.
Thank y'all.
Catherine, Elise, Jasmine, Charlotte, Elena, if you want to hang around on the other rooms, you choose your friend and go after, and we'll meet at room 0 in 5:30, okay?
Thank you.
Congratulations. So last one. So Gabe, I think at the bottom of the screen, there is this chat bubble.
Yeah, I got that. I clicked on the link and it's asking me to sign in. So I'm just.
Oh yeah, sign in, because I think, sign in, and then you will have attendee.
Okay.
It's a little bit tricky, that locker room. We haven't been able to fix it.
It's asking me for a user at tulane.edu and a password, which I don't have. So.
Okay, then let's try the Norman room, which is the other one I posted.
Okay. Let me see.
Because we haven't, so I wait.
Oh yeah, I see Norman room. Okay.
Let's see if that is.
Yeah, I think it's working. I'll see you soon.
Okay, perfect.